Studio, we welcome now Chris Blount, Executive Director of the Wilson Research Foundation at Methodist Rehabilitation Center. Chris, good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So it's my understanding that this is Rehab Awareness Week in the state of Mississippi. Is that correct?
It's the National Rehab Awareness Week.
Okay,
we celebrate.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a national celebration, and this is a time we call out and thank rehab providers, therapists, nurses, the physicians, everybody who does the work of rehab to restore abilities across the country in rehab hospitals.
Okay. So the Methodist Rehab Center opened in 1975.
1975. Right? So we're coming up on our 50th pretty soon, and we treat on average about 1,650 inpatients in our rehab hospital. So that involves intensive therapy, at least 3 hours a day, one-on-one with different therapists, overseen by a rehab physician. Rehab is all we do, and we're, our business, our mission is restore abilities.
Yeah, and so the data I have suggests that about 75% of those who undergo rehabilitation with the organization return home.
Absolutely, and that's amazing when you see who comes through our doors. I mean, these are many catastrophic cases: spinal cord injury, stroke, traumatic brain injury, other severe neurological conditions. So to return 75% to home is amazing, and it's much higher than other levels of care, for instance, like a skilled nursing facility. So we return folks to home. We return them home faster. They have a lower mortality. They're able to get back to their lives, many of them. So it's an honor to do what we do.
Is the Methodist Rehab Center the only of its kind in the state of Mississippi?
There are other rehab hospitals that are part of a bigger hospital, so Forest General in Hattiesburg, for instance, North Mississippi Medical Center in Tupelo, where a floor or a part of a floor is an inpatient rehab. And inpatient rehab means something. It means you have to have a rehab specialist doctor caring for you on the floor. You have to provide a minimum of 3 hours of one-on-one therapy a day, speech therapy, physical, occupational therapy, other disciplines. So multidisciplinary approach.
Okay, and so physical, occupational, and speech, right? And that pretty much makes up the staff of therapists?
Yes, and there's also respiratory therapy, neuropsychology, and in Methodist Rehab we do research. So we do clinical research. That's my role. I'm over the research foundation. So it's human research, past patients or the subjects. We're trying to figure out better ways to rehab people, better ways to restore mobility. So it's walking, use of arm and hands, controlling muscle spasticity. So we have a fantastic research program, 320, 330 published studies to date, somewhere between that number.
So I'm assuming then that a good reason for carving out a week nationwide is to recognize these therapists, these people that work in this industry.
It's a calling. You notice it when you walk into Methodist Rehab. There's a spirit of caring, and these people are called to, this is hard. These people have been through this traumatic, life-altering deal. And our therapists push people to realize their goals. It's individual plans for the families and for the patients, and we try to push them as hard as we can through inpatient and outpatient phases of care. We have outpatient programs that people are with us for a long time sometimes to realize those goals, to return to school or work or whatever their goals may be.
So what about your workforce? How are you doing with respect to staffing?
Oh, that's a great question. We did relatively well during the pandemic. That wasn't fun for any hospital.
Sure.
It was disruptive on a lot of levels. People had to leave work to care for loved ones or move, what have you, but we never had to use a staffing agency for nursing. We have a lot of long-tenured people, and we have specialist nurses, specialist therapists who've gone on to earn advanced certification. So our turnover isn't bad, and we were able to manage through the pandemic, and now we're in really good shape workforce-wise.
Okay. It's hard to talk about anything in healthcare without discussing finance, the economic aspect of it. So I assume that most of your coverage or most of your care is covered by Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, the typical payers of healthcare services. Is it sometimes difficult to get approval for some of these services?
Oh, you better believe it. With the newer Medicare Advantage plans, the initial denial, because you have to get pre-approved for rehab services, the initial denial rate for inpatient rehab is as high as 75%.
Jeez.
For us, it's probably running somewhere in the 60s, Now, that's the initial denial. You can appeal that, but that adds time. And if you're in an acute care hospital and they're trying to move you on, you're stabilized, that's a big deal if your Medicare Advantage plan won't approve your rehab. So we're all over that. We're advocating for change for that. We've been in touch with our congressional delegation. They're very aware. And nationally, this is a problem. And I think we're making some progress on that by calling attention to it. But we're trying to advocate for patients to their right to inpatient rehab.
So in those cases, are sometimes patients kind of put on hold? Their care's delayed until you get approval, or do you go ahead and take them in and fight it later? How's that work?
Usually we try to work it out before they come. There have been occasions where we could bring them in, short of that. It's hard. It's difficult. Sometimes the referring hospital will keep them an extra day or two, try to help us work that out.
Yeah. What's the source of funding for the Methodist Rehab Center?
Well, Medicare and Medicaid, that's going to combine for about over 70% of the business, and then private insurance. We also do a good bit of charity care. We are located on the UMC campus. It's a 501c3 nonprofit hospital, but we're on the UMC campus, and we do have a good number of charity, about 150, 160 charity patients a year. Some of those we're able to enroll in Medicaid, but others, we just take as charity patients. We have a charity policy for spinal cord injury and brain injury. If we exhaust all avenues for insurance coverage, we'll just lean on our policy and we'll do it. We'll handle it.
Yeah, let me rephrase that question. Okay. Don't receive any state appropriations. Is that correct? So no. there's no sliver of money or slice of money that comes from the state general fund that is appropriated to Methodist Rehab. Is that right?
And none from the Methodist Church. We're asked that sometimes, too. The Methodist Church started Methodist Rehab, and that's a good Methodist thing to do to start hospitals, but there's no ownership or governance relationship there. We have a great affiliation with the United Methodist Church, but no money from the church or from the state.
How do the patients come to Methodist Rehab? How do they get referred from?
That's a referral from an acute care hospital.
Okay.
Their goal at acute care is to stabilize the patient, and then we are called if the physicians involved believe that patient needs comprehensive rehab and that they could gain function from comprehensive rehab. Then we're called in.
Yeah. Is the problem particularly acute in Mississippi just as a result of kind of our overall poor quality of health relative to other states?
You mean in the types of patients we see?
Yes.
Sure. We're in the stroke belt. I mean, we have the highest mortality from stroke at about 4.5%. I think we're tied with Alabama on that unfortunate stat. So certainly we have high hypertension, rates of smoking, and so on. So that factors in to the severity of strokes we see, and certainly we have high rates of brain injury and spinal cord injury as well.
So you've got Matt Branch. Tell us about that. Signing his book today.
Yeah, Matt was a LSU player. He actually jokes about being the only guy he knows that was shot by his dog. His hunting dog stepped on a gun that was in the bed of his truck while on a hunting trip and shot his leg. And long story short, he had a high-level amputation and went through an amazing, difficult experience in rehab. And one of our patients lives in Northeast Louisiana. Coming today at noon at Methodist Rehab. He's signing his book. It's a great book. It spent several weeks as the number one best new release on Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
Incredible. And if someone wanted, Chris, to learn more about the success stories?
Go to our website. It's methodistonline.org. Also, social media is at Methodist Rehab, and you will see amazing, brief stories about recovery and hope that will inspire you. Also, if you want to support our foundation, it's a donor-supported foundation, and we'd love for you. All that information's there on the site.
Is there a bit of bonding that sort of occurs within the patient community that you guys treat?
Absolutely. We have support groups, formal support groups, but people will come back to get checkups, come back for an outpatient therapy tune-up. Our orthotics, our prosthetics patients, our amputees, they have to come back for adjustments all the time. So we have points of contact with people, and we just have a great community that supports what we do. And most of our donors have a connection. They had a family member or know somebody who's been helped in a significant way by what we do.
Well, incredible. So looking at the staffing, 54 registered nurses, 50 therapists, is that right?
Yeah, about 50 therapists, inpatient and outpatient. These are PTs, OTs, speech. Many of them have advanced certifications in neurologic care. And so it's just a great workforce.
Yeah. Chris, appreciate you coming in and talking about Methodist Rehab Center, the great work being done there, and also recognizing Rehab Awareness Week across the country, including here in the great state of Mississippi. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Gerard.
We're coming right back with more in the Element Wealth Studios.